Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy M.K.S here, back with another video. Everyone's well wherever you are, with all your friends and family. Hope you have a good Christmas and Happy New Year. I mean, I'm going to make some videos between them, but I don't know, I'm saying it so early, but I know it's just under a week away. I keep saying sorry to remind people they're not into Christmas. But today I thought I'd cover something that I probably thought of quite a few times in the past and didn't quite get around to doing, which is, I thought I'd say like message to FIFA and U.E.F.A and dear FIFA and U.E.F.A and that kind of thing. And I thought, in hindsight, I've been trying to think about what to cover for this. I was thinking, overthinking, wrapping my brains around, trying to think about a different idea for this. But in hindsight, I probably, as it's the last Friday before Christmas, again, so I try to remind people I'm not into Christmas, but I thought I probably should have covered my dreams for Italian football and for course Celtic, like my Christmas wish list for such. But anywho, I could have, should have, would have, but I made the title already, so I thought I'd just stick with this. And another thing is, earlier on today, I already planned this, but then I sort of was second guessing myself or struggling to make decisions today. And then I just decided on this. But when I make these videos, like message to such and such or whatever, or dear such and such, whatever organisation, I struggle to know whether to address the main audience or address FIFA or U.E.F.A directly. But anyway, here are some ideas about football and how I love for dyslexic, dyspraxic, maybe even certainly dyslexic, dyscalculic, as many dyslexic, dyscalculic, dysgraphic, and especially dyspraxic people, and even dyspraxic people, even rather, because I say even dyspraxic because not that many dyspraxic people I don't think are into football, but how we can get more involved in even those with mental health problems, which I hope to come to. So more diverse representation perhaps in FIFA, that's something that perhaps they could do. And yeah, I was thinking maybe I should have done my shopping list, so to speak, my Christmas shopping list for Italian football. But anyway, could have, should have, would have. I might include stuff on that. But sorry, I jumped from point to point. I know. But what I was going to say is, when I was watching YouTube and trying to get motivated and have my breakfast and get ready and that kind of thing, and I woke up a bit later than planned and that kind of thing. I suppose going to sleep late doesn't help that much, but I wish I didn't need to sleep too much. But I wish I could sleep as little as possible. But sorry, I will try and get to the point. But I was thinking about helping Africans to work together to make video games and online games and basically tech games. But I'm hoping to cover that next week, as next week is Boxing Day, and that falls on the 26th, of course. And I think of the number 26 as reparations. But maybe I'll tie something into that video game making and basically online games and tech games for Africans to make, for instance, on behalf of Italian football and Celtic, and for FIFA and U.E.F.A, helping people in Africa to make video games for like FIFA and U.E.F.A and AFCON at least. Maybe not so much U.E.F.A because obviously that's European, but maybe they could make the games on behalf of European teams like Italian teams and Celtic and whatnot. But anyway, here goes. So number one, as I say, I was struggling to decide what I wanted to talk about, what I wanted to cover. So I'm going to do my best anyway, and I want to get ready to. I'm going to a games group later. I even wanted to have like a bath because it's like Friday before Christmas and that kind of thing. But I don't think I'm going to have enough time. Nice life story, but I'll probably have a quick shower before I go. But running behind schedule. But yeah, I was racking my brains around trying to think about what sort of things I would cover. But maybe like how dyslexics could use our creativity, and even, as I say, dyscalculics and dysgraphics to improve football, and even those with mental health problems, and even dyspraxics perhaps. Which could give us a purpose in life. I think there are some, obviously I'm dyspraxic, I'm slightly dyspraxic myself or whatever. I'm really clumsy with my hands, not very good with my hands or whatever, but for whatever reason I got into football, thankfully. I'm a big fan of Italian football because I don't know Italian, and I love Celtic because I'm an anti-imperialist. My one concession, I can say, for supporting Italian football, for supporting Italy, even though they're a former empire and that kind of thing, is to support their football teams. I've mentioned that in the past, but yeah, I was racking my brains trying to think about what we could contribute. Yeah, hopefully I'll think of some ideas to cover in this. Otherwise it could be a really awkward and difficult video, but I've been stressing a little bit, a tiny bit. I know it's a first world problem, but just trying to think about that kind of thing. Now, I'd love to benefit Italian football and for Italian football to win. I think I include that for point number one, because I would say like looking after number one from a selfish point of view. I'd love for the national team and Italian club teams to win, but within the rules and also within laws, most importantly. So if we can win without breaking any rules or laws or whatever, and that kind of thing. And number two, on that note, learning lessons from the past, which I hope to talk about Juventus in January, June, and July. So obviously starting this January, I hope to talk about Juventus for as much of that month as possible coming up, or this month coming up, and June and July, and how they can learn from the Calciopoli scandal. Obviously, this video won't be much for those who are not into football, but another thing is I'd love to see how fans generally could have more of a say. Now, I know I'm a big fan of Italian football and Celtic, but also I'd love for fans, even like rankers, as I call them, rankers fans, but fans from Brazil, Germany, Spain, France, Argentina, and basically all over the world, including places like China and India. And places I think FIFA would be wise to listen to as many fans as possible. On that note, I'd love to have like opinion polls and things like that, maybe on FIFA's website, on their YouTube channel, on their Facebook channel, and things like that, offering a chance for fans to have a say. Now, I know on YouTube and on Facebook you can post comments. Generally speaking, they don't tend to block comments, which I don't think they should do, just because they disagree with opinion. That really bugs me when people do that. Certainly not something I'd want to do, but it would be good to show they actually listen to the fans as well. So not only can you comment, but that they're actually going to listen to what you say. Easier said than done. But I mean, like myself, like people might tell me you need better lighting, you need better speakers or whatever, and all this sort of stuff, which is fair enough. But I do struggle to go out and buy that stuff or whatever. I don't have the finances necessarily, or I don't really like shopping or whatever. But and to damage equipment, like I had a microphone, but I damaged it. I had a ring light and a bit clumsy. I don't know what I've done with that, but it keeps turning on and off. So I don't know if it's just low on charge or whatever, but I do struggle to even though I try and charge it, I don't know what's wrong with it. But yeah, I think if you at least show that you're trying to listen and implement changes, and like the changes FIFA make, they're not similar with UEFA, I guess, but the changes they make are not ignorant to what fans want. So again, even like rankers fans, Rangers fans, rankers and all that, and fans of all different countries, whether that's France, Spain, Germany, England, Argentina, or wherever it might be, having an equal say in like FIFA showing we're going to listen to what fans want. Like, and again, if FIFA implements a change, like says we're going to have 3 halves instead of 2 or something like that, or we're going to have more breaks, or we're going to have certain breaks at certain times, or fans are not happy with VAR and say this is how it could change. Like one idea I thought of, for instance, is like for offside, I think it should be just like for a throw in or a corner or any sort of time when the ball goes off the pitch, the whole ball has to go off the pitch, even if it's a goal or whatever, for instance. And I think that's what offside should be like. The whole player should be past the last defenders, every one of the defenders, or stuff like that. So I'm not saying because I want that, that's what should happen. I think if other fans say, no, we want it to be this way, then I think it should be what the majority of fans want, not just what I or anyone else wants, or one particular person. But if lots of people agree with me and say, yeah, it will be much easier to know, like, is the whole striker, the last striker, or whatever, or the person who scores, or whatever, are they past the last defender? And then it's such a simple rule, everyone can sort of understand it, even me. I'm the one who's saying it. But obviously, then you still have to check and see. But yeah, to be offside would not be like if their toe was offside or their foot or part of their body. It would have to be their whole body, if that makes sense. But on that note, if you have any questions of your own, please fire away. But yeah, I'd love to know what you would change about football and what you think is sacrosanct, or however you pronounce it. So FIFA shouldn't change. So I think it'd be good to have a voice for the fans, to put it as simply as possible. But talking about before I move on to point number 3, I wanted to say, like, I was struggling to think about things to cover, but what people who are interested in dyslexia and dyslexic creativity, I'd love to know what you think we could contribute to football. So maybe FIFA could work with Made by Dyslexia, the Yale Centre for Dyslexia and Creativity, the Dyslexic Advantage, the Childmind Institute Understood, and so many other organisations, and even like mental health organisations, to say it would be good to give people a voice through football, and for FIFA to work with dyslexics, dyslexic empowerment through football, and that kind of thing, even disabled empowerment perhaps through football. I'm going to find it ironic, or even now, but especially in the past, I used to think, someone in a wheelchair, obviously it doesn't mean they don't support football, because like they might be grown up and played football, and then unfortunately met with an accident, and then able to play, but it doesn't mean their mind is not active or whatever. But yeah, how can more disabled people, especially like dyslexic, dyscalculic, dysgraphic, and maybe even dyspraxic people, be involved if they want to, and that could give us a purpose in life. And I'd love for us to share our ideas, which I'd to come to in more details, our creativity, what we could contribute. And moving on, number 3. As I say, listening to fans, and I hope FIFA and UEFA never, and football bodies don't. I hope they don't block people's comments and they allow for freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And again, show they're listening to people's views and allowing people to have different views and agree or disagree with them or whatever. And they're not being basically dictatorial and that kind of thing. I have lots of dreams for Italian football to win somehow within the rules, but to not break any rules or not any of the football rules from FIFA and or UEFA, and maybe work with FIFA and UEFA to make sure they never fall foul of those rules. I suppose you could say Juventus' situation, which I mentioned earlier, is like an example of cheaters not prospering. I mean, the irony is they wanted to get referees, again, I'll talk more about Juventus in January, but they want, and July, and June and July, but they wanted to get the best referees for them, or whatever, so referees or whatever. But in the end, they ended up paying much more and going way down to what they would have been surely if they had not done that, perhaps more than likely. Because even if they wouldn't have won, well, I don't know, I suppose they want to win trophies. I like to win trophies and that kind of thing, but more than likely they would have been better off if they didn't do that. I would like to think so anyway. So people might say cheats never prosper. Yeah, I hope to talk more about Juventus and how I hope they learn and all that kind of thing in January or June, and July, because January, because they all, oh my goodness, they all start with J. Sorry. Yeah, I have a mad dream about like Italy winning 3 World Cups in a row and things like that. But moving on, number 4, as I hope they'll do it within the rules and the laws and that kind of thing. But I'd love for Italian football and Celtic to work together and also to work with FIFA and UEFA. Now, I wouldn't want them to work with them to say, oh, you should give us unfavourable laws. I think the rules and laws or whatever, rules/laws should be for everyone, the same for everyone. But I think it could be good if they said, if they work with FIFA and UEFA to say, within the rules, to say, in the rules and local laws, to say that what is the most amount we could spend, how can we attract more investment and not fall foul of F.F.P, financial fair play rules and things like that. Personally, I'd love for Italian football and Celtic to have millions, billions, or even trillions, ideally. But again, maybe fans could talk about ways to make F.F.P better. I mean, some fans would probably say we don't want too much money in football, we should have caps. Some might want salary caps, not something I'd want, but a lot of fans might want that. So be careful what I wish for, ask for, and that kind of thing. But careful what you wish for, careful what you ask for, and that kind of thing. But I guess it would be fair to be not dictatorial. I don't say dictatorial, but it would be fair to be democratic, not dictatorial. But yeah, listening to fans and that kind of thing, offering opinion polls and saying we're going to actually listen and show that they're listening to fans. But obviously I'm a bit biased in terms of Italian football and Celtic, but I still think it'd be good to give all teams a fair playing field as much as possible. Like for instance, you play with the same football, you play on the same pitch and all that kind of thing. Pretty much, I know some clubs will obviously have better pitches than others, but on the subject of pitches, I would love for FIFA, if Italian football works with FIFA and UEFA and says we're going to tackle racism, hooliganism, and any sort of law breaking or these sorts of things through football, and in return could you give us more funding and enable us access to more investment and sponsorship? Surely having more money in football, I imagine, would benefit FIFA and UEFA. I would imagine there are probably reasons for F.F.P, but I mean the thing is, F.F.P rules and things like that have actually seemed to have not shrunk the gap between teams at the top and the others, but it seems to have a negative effect. I think in life sometimes you have a different effect than you might think you would have, like a surprise effect or whatever, so, or even a shock effect. So for instance, people might think if we tax the rich more, it's going to mean that money will somehow go to the poor, or it will definitely go to the poor, surely if you tax them, and it's going to reduce the gap. But then if rich people can move their money and assets or whatever, then it means that the poor and middle class will end up paying more. It might even drag more middle class people to become a lot poorer, more than likely, and become working class themselves and struggle financially and that kind of thing. So the knock-on effects, you never really know what they're going to be like. So there's certain things in football that you might think, oh, that would help smaller teams, but actually it has a worse effect. It has the opposite effect, basically, and holds back smaller teams. One of the things I find really annoying is like you have to have a certain pitch, you have to have certain funding, you have to have certain investment, and like people talk about helping teams at the bottom, but I think how can that do that if you say they don't have good enough pitch or they don't have finances and that kind of thing. And I'm not sure if I'd like to see any team go bust, even like them, the rankers, because we need a competition. Much I might like to see them struggle and maybe even be relegated perhaps. And I probably wouldn't have too much sympathy if they went bust, but then it'd be a bit boring if we didn't have that competition as well. Much as I want to win pretty much all the time, or most of the time at least. But I was thinking like spaces and places for soccer and stroke places and spaces for playing and practicing. Another one, another one I talk about a lot. So I'd love for FIFA and U.E.F.A to fund like football opportunities for people in Italy and for Celts, for Celtic supporters. I'd also love for Celts to support Celtic generally from all the 8 Celtic countries, when they say kingdoms. But anyway, so I'd love for FIFA and UEFA to give more funding for Italian football in return for Italian football, saying we're going to condemn racism, hooliganism, and things like that, and maybe like listening to members of the black community and improve relations or whatever, and other communities, because even when Italian football tried to tackle racism, they messed up and sort of made things worse. And sometimes it's good to listen to the people you're trying to help. So again, like Dyslexics having a role, they could talk to FIFA about what sort of things we would want. So similar with Italian football, working with like migrants and the black community and things like that. I'd love for Italy to have a migration policy which favours those with a skill or talent for football and things like that. I don't want to get too much into that. So I know this is a bit of a long point, but yeah, I'd love for there to be spaces and places for soccer, amateur football, places and spaces for playing and practicing football in parks, schools, playgrounds, and all over Italy, wherever possible, and for, I'll say, funding to help that to be available, and for parents, schools, teachers, the rest of society to encourage people to play football, to bring back the pride in Italian football. And win, hopefully, within the rules of the game, obviously, and that kind of thing. And most importantly, to win and hopefully do a lot of good as well, football for good. And on that note, I really want to say a point about, I know the video's gone on a bit long, but I did want to say about the point about an idea of mine, which is peace through football, football to promote peace, so football building bridges. So I saw something on FIFA's Facebook page where it said about how football can build bridges, and again, I'd love for Italian football and Celtic to work together with each other, but also with FIFA and UEFA, to say we want to build bridges, and like companies basically to be discouraged from investing in wars, the weapons trade, the military industrial complex, forces and things like that, basically, and instead to be encouraged to invest into Italian football and Celtic and sponsor those sort of things. I'd love for that campaign to be for football generally, but obviously as a fan of Italian football and Celtic, I'd rather see the money go towards Italian football and Celtic. So, like, if a company spends $1 billion on the weapons trade and that kind of thing, that's more about wars and destruction. And if instead they could be encouraged to spend that $1 billion on helping Italian football infrastructure, whether it's clubs like AC Milan, Torino, Fiorentina, or whatever, Serie A itself generally sponsoring Serie A and that kind of thing, or or Celtic, or whether it's the infrastructure on like pitches, 5, 6, and 7-side pitches and things like that for Italian football and Celtic to train together, especially at youth level, and they could do that as part of their PR as well. But another thing I wanted to talk about was like match giving to charity, but I hope to talk about that a bit later. But yeah, so I'd love for there to be like football through peace. So to put it as simply as possible, companies and investors basically being discouraged from investing in wars and the weapons trade and instead be encouraged to invest in football, and specifically Italian football and Celtic, preferably, mostly, at least. Or it could be football generally, but I'd prefer to go to Italian football and Celtic personally. But it could be football more generally, including in developing nations and that kind of thing. So that they can say we don't invest in wars or the weapons trade, but we invest in football pitches, training institutes, that kind of thing. It could be for education as well, that kind of thing. But moving on, number 5, I was thinking of saying this in point number 4, but I knew at that point went on quite long, because there's quite a few of my passionate ideas about peace through football and that kind of thing, and building bridges. I wouldn't say it reminds me of like swords into plowshares, but in this case, wars into football, or violence into changing from violence to football, basically. So peace through football, basically. Yeah, I was going to say about Africans making video games for FIFA, U.E.F.A, and for Italian football and for Celtic, especially. Again, football maybe more generally, but personally, I'd love to see more of that for Italian football and Celtic. And my top dreams for football, I know I mentioned this before, but would be to see, again, within the rules of the game, within the laws and all that kind of thing, international laws, including football laws, but especially laws themselves, legislature and all that kind of thing, not break any international laws. But I'd love to see Italian football win the most World Cups, the national team. Not really bothered about Euros, friendlies or things like that. I'd love to see younger players playing those games to practice, especially in friendlies, so that we can win the bigger games. Although getting into the Olympics would give them an opportunity to practice against other nations. And I'd love to see Italy practice with India, China, and other parts of the world, and hope to develop their game, but at the same time, hopefully that'll benefit Italian football. I know they've done that with Kenya and South Africa a few times, but I hope they'll do that even more, especially with China and India and places like that. That's a bit of a side note from FIFA, but and UEFA and whatnot. But yeah, Italy to win the most World Cups, and Italian club teams to win the most trophies in terms of the league table of like European teams, which I suppose would make them the best teams, club teams in the world, because they generally come from Europe because of the monies and all that kind of thing. But to attract investment and that kind of thing. Number 6, on that note, I thought I'd move on to point number 6. And Celtic to win the most, continue to win the most domestic trophies as well. Again, within the rules of the game. But I love for Italian teams to be co-owned by, and I'm sorry for those who haven't seen my other videos and heard my other videos, and no, I've already said this, but I love for Italian teams to be co-owned by, going back to point number 4, like kind of investors to be encouraged to invest in Italian football, which would mean more money in football. I hope FIFA and UEFA see a positive in that and improving the image of the beautiful game. But I'd love to see Italian teams be co-owned by all possible investors, not just businesses, but even like sovereign wealth funds, and even cities, towns, villages, counties, and whatnot, all sorts of places and areas having their own investment funds, a bit like sovereign wealth funds, which basically invest in things. I love for Italian football to be able to give a good return on investment and be good for PR and that kind of thing somehow. But yeah, to find creative ways. But I'd love for Italian teams to be co-owned by all possible investors that begin with the same letter or letters, like AC Milan being co-owned by Apple, Amazon, Alibaba, Amstrad, and any other company that begins with A. Napoli to invest in Nvidia. Nvidia to invest in Napoli rather. And like Fiorentina being co-owned by, even though like maybe I dreamed of like having a Fortune 500 network, which would invest in Fiorentina or Frosinone. I think of ideas like 5 Nights at Freddy's sponsoring or even investing into having shares in Fiorentina, but they could have their adverts on Fiorentina's videos, like on YouTube and things like that, and maybe vice versa as well. I guess perhaps part of the deal, and then 5 Guys sponsoring Fiorentina, maybe like giving away sort of deals that they can work with the club, like if for season ticket holders they get cheaper deals or whatever, access to Italian markets for investing in Italian football and that kind of thing as well. And number 7, with Celtic, I'd love to see them get as much investment and sponsorship as possible and build like 7-side pitches and things like that. I'm more interested in the youth development when it comes to Italian football, because I support the national team and I support the teams more generally, whereas with Celtic, I'm not too bothered about the rest of Scottish football that much, except for I have a little soft spot for Hibs, and my mates are Ross County fans, so I sort of have a soft spot for them a little bit. They're my 3rd favourite team, I suppose, possibly. But yeah, so as I say, I'd love to see that investment and sponsorship and as much money and funds as possible for Italian teams and Celtic, and for Italian teams and Celtic to play against each other at youth level. And hopefully FIFA and UEFA, as I say, will, within the rules of the game, I say, help with funds of like football tournaments and things like that in return for improving the image of the beautiful game. Number 8, as I say, I love for Celts from all the 8 Celtic countries and Celts around the world to get behind Celtic, those of Irish descent or Celtic descent generally, and maybe even Gaelic descent, and like politicians from those countries to help Celtic, Celtic, and Gaelic political parties, as well as local and regional political parties, to help them. But yeah, also, as I say, people with mental health problems. I think I was going to say that in point number 7, but I forgot. But I thought like 6s and 7s is a saying about people with mental health problems. But yeah, people with mental health problems, including myself, how can we work with FIFA and vice versa and UEFA? And also, as I say, people with dyslexia, to a lesser extent, maybe dyspraxia and dysgraphia and dyscalculia and that kind of thing. And I know you've got to be able-bodied to play football normally, but I mean, there's different types of football where people can play with us, like blind people can play with a sensor or whatever, or deaf people can play, or things like that. But so yeah, football has done a lot for people with disabilities as well, but like fundraising for those who are unable to play football as well. But yeah, and fundraising matches and tackling hooliganism and racism in football, especially Italian football, and with Celtic as well, who does a lot of great campaigns to tackle racism, which is one of the reasons why I, as a POC, as a person of colour, support Celtic as well. I joke about being mixed up because I know Italian football, unfortunately, has a racism and hooliganism problem, if I'm honest. But I hope they can tackle that and improve the image of the beautiful game, and in return get more investment. Just trying to remember if I forgot anything. But number 9, I'd love to see how football could fundraise, as I say, for good causes, training and educational opportunities for people in developing nations, and helping Africans like fundraise to help them to build their own online and video games and tech games generally as well. And number 10, how can football be used to help more younger people, and again give more fans, especially younger fans, more to say, opinion polls and things like that, and bring people together. And how can more younger people get access to football, especially in Italy and for Celtic, and get the balance right between child protection and safeguarding, whilst at the same time helping young people to get those opportunities to learn about football. Again, I suppose I'm more concerned with Italian football and Celtic generally, but also I want everyone to stay as safe as possible. And peace and love, and I'm out.